All right, well, welcome. We're glad you can join us. We're here today for a webinar on Act 55 of 2022, and we're going to talk specifically about some of the changes that state law put into effect related to K-12 threat assessment, as well as the Safe2Say program. I'm really excited to be a host for today's session. My name is Sam Cook. I work at the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, or PCCD, as we are affectionately acronymed. And PCCD serves as the Justice Policy and Planning Agency for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we also do a number of initiatives related to school safety for the Commonwealth, including grant programs, as well as administering a K-12 threat assessment, technical assistance, and training network. I'm joined by two fabulous colleagues in the fun and exciting world of state government and state education policy. I'm going to turn things over to Brittany Klein to tell a little bit about herself and say hello to y'all. Brittany, you want to take it away?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Brittany Klein. I am the director of the Safe2Say program with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. I've been in this position since the inception of this program with our office, and I'm happy to be here and participate in this today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Brittany. And another fabulous colleague, Heather Masshart. Heather, you want to say hello to the group?
Yes, thanks so much, Sam. I'm Heather Masshart. I'm the Director of Policy Services at the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. That PSBA is our fun acronym. And I write board policy documents to help school boards direct and implement things that are occurring in their school entities. I also do a lot of training on school safety and security, as well as trauma-informed approach.
Awesome. Thank you both. All right, well, let's dive right in. So we want to welcome you again. Our webinar session today is really going to focus on reviewing some of those recent changes made to the Pennsylvania School Code related to school safety. There were several changes that were enacted through Act 55. And we're going to really dive into the updated requirements related to education awareness for students, parents and families, and community members regarding threat assessment teams, as well as some of the training requirements that got put into place, what's changed, what hasn't. So you can see our roadmap here. We're going to first start with a background on Act 55, kind of what the law changed, what it entailed. We're then going to discuss a little bit about why the law included a focus on awareness for students, staff, and community. As I mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about what's changed in the law and, importantly, what hasn't. And we'll talk about how schools can meet the letter and the spirit of the law through some creative strategies that we've seen in place and employed across the Commonwealth. And finally, we're going to touch on some ways and strategies that schools can seek assistance and support in this work, since we all know it's really important to recognize that you're not alone in these efforts, and there's a lot of collective wisdom you can tap into in this space. So with that roadmap ahead, let's go ahead and dive in. So Act 55 of 2022 is a package of school code amendments that were signed into law by the governor as part of the fiscal year 2022-23 budget. It was signed on July 8th, 2022, and it became Act 55 of 2022. It's 137 pages long. So if you're ever looking for something to read and you have trouble sleeping at night, definitely recommend it, or maybe not. It might contain some things that might freak you out, but we're here to allay those fears. And I think folks have definitely dived in and kind of digested a lot of those changes over the last couple of months. So there's new school safety and security provisions that are included in and amongst those 137 pages. The law amended Article 13B, which is the school safety and security section of school code, and it also amended Article 13E, which focuses on threat assessment. So a little snapshot of what Act 55 covers from a school safety and security perspective. So it did include a new survey requirement for school mental health services. So if you're a school entity, this should sound familiar. You received this survey back in August. It also included some new formula-based grant programs for school safety and security and school mental health. Again, hopefully sounds familiar. PCCD is working to process through those right now to make sure that resources get out into the field. There was also a new school-based mental health internship grant program within the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, or PHEA. The law also included some new requirements for school safety and security coordinators. It also provided new requirements related to training and professional development for current as well as future school personnel. And then last but certainly not least, it included some updates to threat assessment training, education, and awareness requirements. And you can see we have that highlighted because that's what we're going to really focus on during our time together today. All right, so let's dive into the threat assessment pieces. So we mentioned that Act 55 amended Article 13E, which again is that section of school code focused on threat assessment. And what it did is establish some new training and education and awareness requirements. So you can see here a couple of those key requirements are elevated for your attention. We'll certainly walk through those kind of as the rest of the webinar goes through. So all school entities under Act 55 now must annually facilitate opportunities for members of threat assessment team to complete group or individualized training. Schools also have to annually ensure that students, employees, and parents and guardians are informed of the existence and purpose of the school entity's threat assessment team or teams if you have more than one. And then finally, school entities need to provide threat assessment training each year to school employees, and that training can take place either online or in person. So we want to start with the education and awareness piece. So I'm going to pass things over to my colleague Heather, who's going to walk you through a little bit about what that entails. And I'm sure Brittany will contribute as well with some great information from the Safe2Say lens of things. So Heather, take it away.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Sam. So let's focus for a minute on the why. Why are we doing awareness activities for students, staff, and community? So as Sam said, under Article 13E, school entities must annually now ensure that students, school employees, and parents and guardians are informed of the existence and purpose of the school entity's threat assessment team or teams, and that information also has to be posted on the school entity's website. So this is not a new requirement. This is a new annual requirement. So why students? Why has this focus been on students, providing students with this information? Well, research has told us for decades that students are our most valuable tool. They're the eyes and ears of what we see happening in schools. It's often the students that are making those reports. And I'm going to throw it over to Brittany for a minute, because one of the ways, then probably the primary way those students are making reports is through the Safe2Say Something program. So Brittany, do you want to tell us a little bit over the last year or two what that's looked like and what are we seeing from our students?
Sure. So most of you are probably aware of the program and the goals of the program. And really the true heart of this program was developed to give kids that voice. We want them to know that this tool is available for them, that they can report something, whether it's something that is minimal, that they're not unsure of, but it makes them uncomfortable or gives them that gut feeling that says that they just need to tell somebody. And some of those students are just embarrassed because they think it's something little, but they feel like they need to report it based on how history has and the news and the media has pushed out information regarding incidents in schools. So we really are giving this to our students to reach out and let us know what is going on, so it's even something that we can keep an eye on and that our schools can become aware of. That is a huge factor in what we have been seeing. So since the inception of the program, we have reached over 100,000 tips, and we can say most of those tips have come from students within schools who are reporting something of concern. Now, obviously, some of those are not huge concerns, but students are still using this tool, but others have led to actually removing weapons off of students or saving students' lives. And it's because they're reporting what they see in school or what they hear out of school or on social media. So that is actually a huge piece of awareness in our schools. I can say that in the past year, we've had a significant increase of threats reported through the Safe2Say system, which immediately go to our schools to look into. And Safe2Say analysts are always standing by for our schools to help get through any of those threats that come through and help decipher any of that information.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I mean, that's obviously the why, right? This is what we are seeing and hearing from students, whether they're doing it through Safe2Say or doing it simply through approaching a teacher or a school counselor. They do see and hear everything that goes on in a school, often more so than the adults do among their peers. And so giving them awareness and direction on how to appropriately address situations, report situations is a critical part of threat assessment. So why school employees? Well, obviously school personnel, and this includes much more than teachers and school counselors. This includes our cafeteria workers. This includes our bus drivers. This includes our cleaning staff. All of these individuals play a key role in a school community and interactions with our students. And so having all of those school employees informed about the threat assessment team, about the threat assessment process, about Safe2Say and how to direct kids to make reports and who to talk to at the school is also very critical for being another level of eyes and ears on the ground when a student is in need, when there is a potential threat, when a student needs support. And why parents, guardians? Well, parents and families are also our allies. I know sometimes we hesitate in the school community to report something out to parents because we don't want parents to overreact to something that maybe isn't a significant issue in our eyes. But parents and families are our eyes and ears at the bus stop. They overhear things sitting around the dinner table or in the room next door when a student is on the phone with a peer and that peer is in crisis. So having parents and guardians involved in these activities as well and knowing how they can report and make reports and who they can talk to at the school is also a critical piece of our threat assessment process. So let's go right into what's changed and what hasn't in terms of Act 55. So of course, one of our requirements is school safety and security training for employees, and that has not changed. We've had a school safety and security training for employees in place, identification or recognition of student behavior that may indicate a threat to the safety of other students, school employees, school facilities, the community, or others. There is now a prescribed length of time. So yes, that is a change. There is now a prescribed length of time. That actually comes out of the changes to Article 13B, school safety and security changes that passed with Act 55. So school entities now must provide an annual training on threat assessment and identification or recognition of student behavior that may indicate a threat. And that is coupled with a requirement on emergency drills. And those two items must be covered annually, and both of those items must be at least 1 hour combined. So there's not a specific breakdown on 15 minutes on this, 30 minutes on this, that kind of breakdown, but you do have to have 1 hour annually. And part of that 1 hour does have to be towards identification or recognition of student behavior that may indicate a threat. Is there prescribed content for what goes into what is trained, the employee training? This is also a yes. So this is again something that did change in Act 55. The School Safety and Security Committee that is housed under PCCD was responsible for developing and publishing training standards, not just on identification or recognition of student behavior that indicates a threat, but actually on a whole series that comes out of Article 13B for school safety and security issues. So they were charged with approving standards. Those standards were approved this fall by the committee. And you can see if you go to PCCD's School Safety and Security webpage, you can pull up a frequently asked questions document. There's also a document that outlines the specific standards. So there are specific items that must be covered during that training. There will be training forthcoming, and we're going to get to that. But for now, schools are able to use those standards and the FAQ document and actually provide that training starting now because that requirement is in effect for their staff. And as a reminder, this is all of your school employees. So this is not just your student-facing employees like teachers. This does include your cafeteria workers, your bus drivers, your crossing guards, those individuals who are school employees. This portion of the school safety and security training on identification or recognition of student behavior that indicates a threat may be completed either virtually, online, or in person. So these are some of the yes changes that happened under training for employees. Sam, do you want to flip to the next one and we'll talk about what other items have changed and what haven't? So another part of the threat assessment requirements is annual notification, education, awareness for students, school employees, and parents, guardians related to the threat assessment teams, and also that identification of student behavior that may indicate a threat. So this is what we talked about the why of a few minutes ago. Why do we train all these people? We talked about this. This is the actual training requirement. So there is an annual requirement now. That's what is new. The frequency is prescribed annually, but there is no change and there is no prescribed length of how long that training has to be. So there's nothing set that says it has to be an hour training here when we're talking about students, school employees, parents, guardians, about the threat assessment team's existence, who serves on the team, and those recognition activities and awareness that you're sharing with these groups. Is there prescribed content? No, school entities have latitude in meeting that requirement. They do have to provide that information, and they do have to post it on their school entity's public website. And to be honest, this is where I often see schools do this along with the Safe2Say something information, because a lot of times they're posting that on their website. If you've done that, post threat assessment information on the same page, because they go together in your students' eyes. They're very much related. So you have latitude in what that content is and where you're going to place it, but you do have to provide it annually and it must go on the website. And then finally, when we're talking about additional changes, what's changed and what's hasn't, the training for the threat assessment team members. So another section of the Article 13E is that the threat assessment team needs to be provided with training. Again, the change here is that it needs to be provided annually. So the district must annually facilitate opportunities for members of the team to complete group or individual training consistent with nationally recognized best practices during paid working hours or as in-service training. Is there a prescribed length of time? No. While again, the change is that it has to be annually, there's no prescribed length of time for how long that training has to be, and what it entails for each of the team members. That is not addressed in statute. So there again is where your district or your school entity has some local flexibility about how that's being provided. Is there prescribed content? There is not content prescribed in the statute. So the statute does not say it must include this specific set of training. It does include some specific items that need to be addressed, and those include the responsibilities of the team members, the process for identifying, reporting, assessing, and intervening in reported behavior. It does have to include training on recognizing racial, cultural, or disability bias, and it also needs to cover confidentiality requirements of the team. So those are the 4 items it has to generally address, but how and in what order and the specific content is not prescribed in statute. What is prescribed in statute is that PCCD's team was tasked with developing training and technical assistance resources to help schools. And they did do that and rolled that out when that piece of the statute was first passed previously. So PCCD does have threat assessment training and technical assistance network that is aligned with national best practices. I've taken it. It's fantastic. There is online opportunity. They also have additionally added some in-person opportunities. They've done that a couple of times, and Sam will jump in at the end with some more details about that and how you find that information. But that is a resource that is provided for school entities at no cost. So that is something that you have a statutory requirement to do it. You don't have a prescribed set of training that you have to do. You have flexibility in who you would like to have provide that training, but there is a packaged training ready and available for your team. Sam, anything you want to follow up on with that?
No, I appreciate the shout out to the program. It's been great working with lots of different collaborators on that to develop those training opportunities. I will just add that obviously, some trainings are designed for folks who are brand new to their roles and are really going to be comprehensive. We have a full day kind of basic training, if you will, that's really designed for folks who are new to their role or for newly kind of established teams or teams that have really significantly changed membership. That may not be appropriate to kind of keep taking the same 8-hour foundational training, right? You don't want to do that year over year. And so we are working in close collaboration with some of our training providers to try to fill in some of those gaps with some additional kind of next level scenario-based training, some technical assistance opportunities that are available for districts and school entities as well. So more to come on that, but appreciate the opportunity to make that plug. Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Sam, in that, if you're doing online training or really any type of training that you engage in, whether it's PCCDs or through another trainer, there's real value in sort of having a refresher version. And in terms of PCCDs, they have some great tabletop exercises they've been developing that will give your team, if they are all veterans, a chance to kind of hone their skills and dive a little deeper and walk through those scenarios, not just here's what a threat assessment team is, here's what it should do. So getting those basics is so important for new members. And we do know there's been a lot of staff turnover in the past year. So just a reminder that make sure you do have that basic version available for your new team members all the time. But that annual training can include more of a refresher kind of level.
Absolutely. I think that's a good example too, as we kind of transition to talking about how schools can maybe meet the letter and the spirit of the law. So obviously meeting the letter of the law would be, who cares? Just take the same training, every single year and tell folks, here's the link, do it, let me know when you're done. But that's probably not going to suit us kind of in the long run in terms of best serving each other and best serving our school communities. And so really thinking about what your particular team or your school community has dealt with in the past year, thinking about some topics or areas or experiences that have been challenging for you, things that you don't feel super prepared for. I always like to think about kind of what would keep you up at night. What's that thing where you're just super worried that if that happens, that you're not ready? Maybe that's an area to start looking at some potential trainings, some things that you want to send folks on your team to engage in. So there's lots of other good examples. That's just one, but I wanted to provide some space for Heather and for Brittany to kind of talk a little bit about some of the other ways that as you're thinking about these new requirements, what are some things that other school entities have been exploring or implementing that really kind of get to both that letter and spirit piece? So Heather, I'll turn it back over to you to get us started.
Sure. I do have a great opportunity to be out in the field among school entities a lot when I'm going out to do training or even just very deep phone conversations when folks are working through policy documentation or the other forms and things that sort of help them implement their policy in the statute. So I have heard some really great school created trainings and approaches that they've used that I wanted to kind of share with you that, like we said, you don't always need that basic training. And as everything first rolled out and these requirements first came into place, we were all very much focused on the basic, let's get our school entity team trained at the basic level and kind of up and running. And now we should be in that place where hopefully if you haven't had too much staff transition and turnover, you do have some folks who kind of have a year under their belt, who have done a little bit of this, who have hopefully gone through the process once or twice, hopefully for your sakes with a transient threat and not something more substantial, but at least have kind of walked through the process, walked through a flow chart or a checklist or one of the other fabulous documents that are available. And so now there are a lot of teams that I've seen that are starting to expand. Okay, maybe it's time to include others on this team. Maybe we didn't really overlap it tightly with our crisis response team or our student assistance program team. And maybe now we want to expand our team by a couple of people and see how that would work. Or maybe we started with a single entity-wide team And now we're thinking it would be great to have at least 2 middle school and high school, and then that they periodically collaborate. So I've seen a lot of schools start to look at this as we walk into this year and what our annual training is going to look like. Are we bringing more people in? Are we changing up the structure? Are we reaching out to more community partners? Maybe we didn't have a school resource officer before, and thanks to some new school safety and security grant money, we now have a school resource officer. And how are we going to loop that person into this process? Or when a Safe2Say report comes in, what is that person's role going to be? So think about how your staff has changed, how your structure might have changed over the last year. Do you have other community partners? Is there someone in the local DA's office who's been really instrumental in helping you work with juvenile issues this year? And is that person able to be a resource? I've seen one district, and I'll give them a shout out, Indiana area, took the state's form from PCCD, the threat assessment form, and loaded it into Google Forms, and they actually walk through and it connects to their student record system. So it's very interactive and it really helps their staff walk through the process with a lot more confidence. So part of their training this year has been to kind of learn, how do we take what we've learned as basic and take it to the next level, streamline it more, make sure everyone can access the information, and make sure we're following up on those confidentiality tightening requirements and things like that. So there's been some great work that I've seen at school entities, and I think this is a great forum to hear more about those things and think about, oh, how could I do that, or who could I partner with to kind of expand what we're doing? Brittany, do you want to talk a little bit about the Safe2Say student training materials?
Sure. And before I actually get into the specific student training materials, I also want to say that we are also available. As Heather said, there has been a lot of turnover. So if you feel that your school team needs a whole retraining on Safe2Say because you have a lot of newcomers to the program or newcomers receiving tips, please let us know. We're happy to do training on use of the program and how the program works and certain things of the program that might be helpful as far as pulling reports or gathering statistics or anything of that nature. So we're happy to help with that rollout again if you do have a lot of new members to the team. Also, this has never been a program that is like, you can only do it this way. We will make things happen for you. You just have to let us know what you're looking for, and we can kind of be creative in the way we set up your team, or if we need to switch people around because you have an on-call person or vice versa, whatever you need, we can help with that. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions about designing your school team to receive the tips. So now I'll go into a little bit about student training. We've seen a lot of adjustments with student training based on just models that are developed from districts and rolling out the Safe2Say training. You can have fun with it. We actually are trying a new thing where we're going around and meeting with some student groups and hearing what they have to say. We've also had other schools that have approached us about a train the trainer type training that we could provide, or training students to actually provide the Safe2Say training. So using a student representative to provide a training. We will happily engage in any of those types of trainings if it's something that your school is interested in. We do poster contests. We encourage schools to do something within their own school if they would like to. We do video competitions every now and then. And then we also have a ton of Safe2Say materials that we can do something as simple as just a table event and have people there to answer questions, or we can provide you the materials if you think you have students who would do a table event or some sort of even a community event. We will do all of that stuff. We just ask that you reach out to us and we will see what we can make happen. You can always reach us through our Safe2Say inbox, and that is actually info@safe2saypa.org. So please contact us and we'll be happy to coordinate any of your trainings and even come do any of your trainings. Or if you would like a virtual training, we can do that as well. So don't hesitate to reach out. We will make it work for your school. And certainly if you have any additional suggestions or great training programs that you launch in your own district, we'd be happy to hear those as well.
Thanks so much, Brittany. Yeah, I've seen some amazing creativity as I've been out and among schools and districts. And one of my favorites was, of course, so many of you received the general Safe2Say Something posters when the program first started. And I was out at a CTC earlier this year who has those in various areas in the building. But underneath, they kind of did this poster contest where they had students add to the bottom of the poster, here's how I would use Safe2Say, which I thought was pretty creative and cool, and just, gave students another option to look at. Oh, this isn't just if somebody's, threatening with a bomb threat or something like this. This is, if I have a friend who's hurting themselves, or if I have a friend who I'm concerned about suicide ideation, those sorts of things. So it was a great way to see how they've really embraced that. So those poster contests, those video contests, we've heard of students doing announcements in the morning. Brittany's talked a little bit about that before. In terms of, deeper student awareness and interaction, we've seen schools do that in the health curriculum, going through when they're doing some of their dating violence education, for example. Like, here are other ways to think about what is threat assessment and how do I use Safe2Say, even if it's not happening on the school campus right at that moment. It's happening in our school community, and I'm concerned about how this is going to impact this student. So those types of things that are a little bit deeper. I've seen schools do follow-ups after school safety drills. Like, okay, we just had an intruder drill. These are scary for our kids. We recognize that, especially at the elementary level. Let's talk about why are we doing an intruder drill and how could we prevent having an intruder? So sometimes taking that focus from this is scary and this could happen to how would I prevent this is really helpful for our students and even our teachers and our staff members at that school to kind of switch that focus while meeting two requirements, right? So that's always a good thing as well. Other things that I've seen is actually at PTO meetings, when we're talking about that parent and family engagement. When you're at a PTO meeting, having the principal introduce who is our threat assessment representative. Do we have someone at this school that we know is on the threat assessment team? Can they talk about that for a minute? How does Safe2Say work? I hear my kids talk about it sometimes. Somebody pull out the phone and show the app. And do you know that this is how it works? Do you know that this is who receives it at our school, and kind of our process for responding? Again, the more we have those parents kind of looped in who are extra eyes and ears, especially at home, I think those are all great things, and we've seen great results from that. Sam, I'll kick it back over to you. Sure.
Yeah, that's great. And I love this sort of combo, right? You can do two things at once. And I think those are really great suggestions and super cool ideas. And I'm sure we're not done with that list yet, right?
Sure.
There's plenty of cool things that schools are probably doing right at this very moment. So in terms of kind of not reinventing the wheel, this probably shouldn't come as any surprise that we don't want you to do that. You've already heard a ton of resources referenced. Would certainly encourage folks to check out, if they haven't already, the brand new second edition of our Model K-12 Threat Assessment Procedures and Guidelines document, which was published earlier this fall from PCCD School Safety and Security Committee. That document includes a ton of links to resources, materials, model programs that you can go explore for different topics about threat assessment and related areas and disciplines. We certainly have a big library of resources on our threat assessment webpage. I know the Safe2Say webpage has a ton of great resources too. And our K-12 Threat Assessment Network website also includes some dedicated resources in addition to those training courses that we mentioned before. And then I think the other area to just bear in mind, and this has come up, I think, in our discussion so far, is just remembering that, again, you don't have to do this work alone, and that you can certainly connect with and learn from other school entities in your region or community. One example that comes to mind is maybe reaching out to your IU, your intermediate unit Safe Schools lead, getting some ideas about maybe some activities or ideas that schools within your region have been using. You can also reach out to folks and groups like your county safety councils, right? So not necessarily entirely school focused, but they deal a lot with these types of issues and may have some good suggestions for you. And it's always a good relationship building opportunity. I'm going to pass it back over to Heather to round out this part of our discussion with collaboration and proactivity.
Yes, we very much promote collaboration. As you can see, the three of us from different organizations and entities in the state, we love the opportunity to collaborate, to work together, to learn from each other and hear what will be most helpful for schools. And that's what our hope is for you too. Collaborate, be proactive. I think we've all invested a lot of time and energy over the last 4 to 5 years, really focusing on suicide awareness, on bullying prevention awareness, and we've really work to try and break that stigma, especially around suicide prevention and suicide awareness, that, mental health is important. And the same is true for threat assessment. We really need to talk about these things. School safety is a huge issue. School violence is terrifying to everyone, but we don't have to have a stigma around this either. There are a lot of proactive ways that we can address school safety and security issues, and threat assessment is really a huge part of that. It's not about focusing on something that a student did wrong and disciplining them for that or taking them out of the environment. It's about identifying when a student is acting out because it's a cry for help so often. And sometimes it's for themselves that they, may want to harm themselves. And sometimes they're acting out and focusing on trying to harm someone else. But really, it's an internal issue or a concern that they need support for. So looking at threat assessment as that proactive tool and trying to get rid of that stigma of this is dangerous, this is terrifying, this is terrible, I don't want anything to do with it. Embrace it. This is our practice. This is what we do as educators, is we identify student needs and we build a direction to help them get to where they need to be. And threat assessment is really a big part of that as well, in terms of their mental health, in terms of their social well-being. So collaborating with others, of course, has to be a huge part of that. We all know schools do not have enough counselors, schools do not have enough social workers. You have to build those relationships outside your school entity, your local law enforcement. You should already be collaborating with them anyway. If a Safe2Say report comes in, then of course you're very often going to be coordinating with 911 dispatch or local law enforcement, depending on the type of report. So you should be building those relationships, but also building them with behavioral health, with local hospitals, with local counseling centers, with your DA's office or other juvenile justice and county agencies. Those are the things that we should start to focus on as we look more and more at threat assessment and how we can build out our teams. You're not alone. Reach out for help. Reach out to us at any of these agencies. Reach out to the entities that are local to you. But collaboration, more hands-on, is always better.
That's great. And I just wanted to put another shameless plug in. If you are a school entity and any of this is sounding like, oh, I don't know where to start, we do also have some free technical assistance that we can provide through that K-12 threat assessment training and TA network. And of course, as Brittany mentioned, lots and lots of resources and help available at no cost through the Safe2Say program. And I know Heather spends many countless hours on the phone with schools helping them as well for member districts. So speaking of you're not alone and reach out for help, let's end on where can schools seek assistance and support. We've already touched on some of the resources with Safe2Say at PCCD. You can certainly check out the resources at the Pennsylvania Department of Education Safe Schools Office. PEMA has a lot of good information around emergency management and preparation and response through their school and child care safety section. PSBA obviously provides great policy and other types of resources and supports. And then there's a ton of local, statewide, and federal resources available. These are just a snapshot. Homeland Security See Something, Say Something, Secret Service's National Threat Assessment Center, which regularly produces reports, as well as other information and does some trainings as well. Schoolsafety.gov, which is a clearinghouse, has a whole section on threat assessment and reporting. And then certainly there's the Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools, or REMS, TA Center as well. So just a small snapshot. Again, certainly encourage you to check out the guidelines and our website for more. As we head towards wrapping, I'm just going to pause and see if my colleagues have any final thoughts or pearls of wisdom that they'd like to document for the record and share before we close out today's session.
I think these are great resources, Sam, and I just encourage folks to dig deeper. You're going to click on some of these links and be like, okay, wow, I don't even know where to go from here. I get that it's intimidating. As a former librarian, use those search functions on this website, kind of narrow down what it is you're looking for. Use those request for assistance email addresses, and Sam's going to pop one of those up in a minute. Those really are answered by people. I know they are at Safe2Say. The info one is answered. I know they are at PCCD, and certainly here as well. And really do look at the PEMA safety information. If you're not aware, I didn't realize that so many school entities are not aware at how many of those resources they've updated and revised in the last couple of years. So if you haven't been back to those resources recently, go back and check them out. They have a whole new communications module for school emergency planning that's really fantastic and really can give you some additional ideas on how to communicate not just during an emergency, but during these other incidents that you may need to address. So check them out.
And as always, send us an email or give us a call here at Safe2Say if you need help with anything or any of your trainings being launched in your schools. Also, I encourage you to check out our annual report as well, which is available on our website, so you can see our current trends and how things have changed over the years. And if you want to view any of our previous reports, we're happy to send those to you upon request at any time as well.
All right, well, thank you both so much. Here's that resource account that Heather mentioned. If you do have any questions, you want to get some more information about any of the topics that we've covered today, please don't hesitate to send our team an email. We appreciate your time. We know everyone watching this is busy, and we certainly know that our presenters are as well. So a big thanks to Brittany and Heather for sharing a bit of their time today. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day and a great 2023.